Hey everyone, I'm Hank.
And I'm Kate.
And we're from the Comp 110 team, and today we are back with another video, and we're going to talk about recursion.
Woo! And we're going to use JavaFX and shapes to show you how recursion can be beautiful. Specifically, we're going to make a bullseye so we can hit Comp 110 in the middle of the bullseye. Exactly. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So this week in Comp 110, we are learning about a really cool concept in computer science called recursion. And this can take a little mind bending at first to understand, but once we figure it out, it's actually really powerful and you can do some really cool things with it. So recursion is just kind of like Inception, but with method calls. So in simplest terms, it's just a method that calls itself. So you start out with some method, and somewhere in that method you make a call to that same method, and you jump inside that method again, and then inside that method you jump inside the same method again until some base case is reached when you return back through all the methods. So there, it's kind of like Russian dolls, or like that prank you've always wanted to do on your friend where you open a box inside of a box inside of a box, and it lets us do really cool things, especially with graphics on computers. So today we're going to show you both how recursion works and show your way around the JavaFX shape classes. So the first thing we're going to do is make a bullseye class. So we'll make a new class and name it bullseye. And that class, so if you think about a bullseye, all a bullseye is a group of circles, right? So we're going to have one field, make it private, and it's going to be of the type group. And so in the JavaFX shape, there's this class called group that can just hold a group of shapes. And we're going to name it _circles. And we'll have to come over here and import a group. Great, so now that we've made our one field of circles, we're going to make our constructor, and constructors are public and have no return type, and the name of the constructor is the name of the class. So we're going to say public bullseye, and we want to pass in a parameter to this constructor. We want to say whenever you create a bullseye, you specify the radius of it, so you can make bullseyes of different sizes, right? So we're going to say an int radius, and now inside our constructor body, we want to initialize our circles field and then fill it with circles. So first things first, we're gonna say _circles equals new group. And we can say it just like that, make a new instance of the group class and assign it to _circles. So now we have this circles field, which you can think of kind of like an array that holds all of the circles in our bullseye. But of course that's going to start off empty, so now we need to add the circles to our bullseye. And to do that, we could set up some kind of loop and every time add another circle, but we're learning recursion today, so we're going to make one method call to a method that we're about to write called add circles. And we're going to pass in the radius that was passed in as an argument to the constructor. And because we're making a method call on some method that's going to be in the same class that we're inside, we're going to use the this keyword and call this.addCircles and pass in the starting radius that we're given as a parameter in the constructor. Great, so add circles of course doesn't exist, so let's add it. And we're going to make this method private because we only need this method inside this one class. We don't need people in some main class somewhere else to be able to say bullseye.addCircles because we've already added the circles for them. We just want whoever's using our bullseye class to be able to say new bullseye with a radius and everything just works. So we're going to make a private method, and since it just does something in the class, it doesn't return any value, the return type is going to be void. And the name of our method, of course, is addCircles. And addCircles, just like our constructor, takes in a radius. So we're going to say int radius here. And now we have a method, and inside that method we're going to start at some radius and add circles, progressively getting smaller until we get to some value that we decide is the smallest circle we want. So that's the first step in writing a recursive method usually, is to set up what's called a base case, or some case where we want the method to stop calling itself. Otherwise we get a Stack Overflow error because the method just keeps calling itself and stacking on more and more and more layers until the computer gives us an error. So base cases are usually with if statements. So we're going to say if the radius that we get pass in is less than 2, let's say, then we just return. And even though this method has a return type of void, we can say return, and it'll just break out of the method. It'll just stop. So it won't return a value, but we can just use the keyword return here to say, like, stop running the method. So now that we've got our base case, we'll avoid Stack Overflow errors, we can do the process of adding the one circle that we're going to add on this run of the method. So the first step of that is making a circle. So we're going to say circle equals is assigned a new instance of the circle class. And we're going to have to import circle from javafx.scene.shape. And so now we have a circle that we can use. So we're using these classes that we're importing now from JavaFX, and we thought it would be good just to give you a small tour of those classes because they're Java classes just like you and I are writing that were written by the creators of JavaFX. They're pretty complicated and have a lot of documentation in them, but you can look inside of them just like you can look inside classes that you wrote. So on my Mac, you hold the Command key and click on a class name. On PC, you hold the Control key and click on something. But you can hold down your Command or Control key and click on the name of a class, and it'll open that up. So now Kate's going to give you a tour of the circle class.
Woo, circle.
Okay, so this circle class shouldn't look much different than any other object-oriented thing that we've made. And that's because it is object-oriented, just someone else made it for us, and we're just using it because we don't want to write our own right now every time we want to make a circle. So we can go in here and we see the class declaration at the top here. And it's extending shape. You don't really need to know what that means right now, but basically that means it's using another class's methods as well. And that's great. It just makes it easier for them to make a circle because it's the idea of a shape that it's already using. Okay, so you can see that it has fields. So you can see private final ellipse 2D shape. That's one of the fields. And so you can just go through this and see things that you recognize, like a constructor here, public circle, double center X, double center Y, double radius. So it gives you an option of making a circle with only an X center, a Y center, and a radius. Or it gives you the option of making a circle with nothing, just an empty instance of circle. Or it gives you the option of making a circle with a radius and a fill. So this shows that you can have multiple constructors in one class, and that lets the user decide what information they want to give this class in order to make it. And so here we see we have our constructors, and we can keep moving down it, and here we find another instance variable or another field called center X. So basically when we make a new circle in our bullseye, we are just, as we go back here, are simply saying new circle. So we're using the empty constructor. So if you can see, that's the one right here. So it goes here in the circle class, which is really nice. And through looking through this, we can see what kind of stuff we can do with the circle. So we can set where it shows up on the screen. So we can set the center Y. And we can also get that center Y, so we can find out where it is here. And let's keep looking. This is fun. We're exploring. So another thing you can do in the circle class that we're going to do later is public final void set radius. And we actually use that class later in Bullseye. We're going to say, we're going to go in here and we're going to say circle.setRadius to equal our radius value. And that's what we're going to change each time. So this shows you how we can go into the circle class and we can use all of its contents without having to write this from the start. So we could have easily just went ahead and said circle equals new circle, and went ahead and put radius in here. But instead, we want to go ahead, just so we know the steps, and make it an empty constructor. So we go into the circle class and it'll show that instead of making this circle instance, it's going to go to the empty constructor here. And we're going to manually call this setRadius method that it has in here. So let's find their setRadius method. And that's right here. So we're going to go ahead and manually set the radius, which is going to set the radius value to equal what we pass in. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say circle dot set radius. So we're going to do circle dot set radius, and we're going to just simply put in our radius. So remember, alternatively, because in the circle class it gave us the option of using the constructor that added the radius, we could have also just said circle equals new circle, and then immediately put that radius value in. And we knew that because we looked around in that radius class and saw that it had that option as well. Well, we only need one of these, so I'm going to go ahead and comment that out. So now that we've made this circle and added a radius to it, let's go ahead and add the circle to our group of circles, because eventually we want to have one circle on top of the next on top of the next, so we can shoot that bullseye. So to do this with a group, to add something to a group, you have to use the call getChildren on the group. Kind of confusing, but basically what it's saying is I want you to understand that what I'm adding to this parent or this group is a child of it, and I want you to add it as a child. So to do that, we just say circles, which is the name, the instance variable name of our group, dot getChildren dot add, and then in the parentheses of the add, you add what you're adding. So circle. And there we go. We've now added a circle to our group. Well, before we move on and start to implement add circle as a recursive function, which we have not done yet, it's only being called once and it's not calling itself because we haven't said this.add circles. Let's go ahead and just make sure that our circle is being added to our group. So let's make a main class and run it. So to do that, we're just going to go here and make a new class, and let's be unique and call it main. Great. And we can press this button and it'll type up that main method line for us. So we're in our main method, and we're using JavaFX. It's basically a library for showing things in a very visually nice way. Well, we need to show our circle on something, and when you paint, you normally paint onto a canvas. Conveniently, when you show circles, you show them on a canvas as well in this computer world. So there's a canvas object, just as there was a circle object. So we're going to say canvas equals new canvas. And remember, I didn't have to name this canvas. Just because I named it that doesn't mean it gives it this option of being a canvas. Like I could have named this bliss because it's blissful to paint. So canvas bliss equals new canvas. And then it's red here because I need to import that just as I imported a circle. So I import it, and now we have our canvas named bliss, and we now can make a bullseye. So bullseye because I'm going to name it something that is representative of what it is, unlike bliss, equals new bullseye. And remember, bullseye takes in a parameter that is the radius of the largest circle. So I'm going to say 10 because 10 is a nice number. Now your canvas doesn't know immediately to put this bullseye on it. It has to be told to draw it on itself. So we say bliss dot draw, and we just put bullseye in there. And we can't just say bullseye. We specifically have to say we can't just put a bullseye on a canvas. A canvas doesn't understand that, but a canvas does know how to paint a group onto it. So we realized we are having a problem here. We can't paint a bullseye on it. So we need to go back to our bullseye method and make a getter that will return a group, which is our circles group. So let's quickly make a getter super fast. When we make a getter, we say public, and it returns whatever we're trying to get, which is a group. And we're going to say get circles because that's what we're doing. We're getting our group of circles. Get circles. And remember, getters don't have parameters. And then all we do here is we just return circles. And there we go. Now we can draw something onto our canvas. So we can say bliss.draw bullseye.get circles. And now our ugly red X went away. Yay, that's so gratifying. Perfect. Let's see if it works. And there's a big black circle on a canvas. Yay, we're so close. So let's go back to our bullseye class and start making this recursive.
Awesome. So now to add the fun recursive part, we're inside bullseye.java, and the recursion is going to happen inside add circles. So instead of just adding one circle, we want to step inside the method again, and conveniently we're kind of going inside the circle before and add another circle. And then at the end of adding the other circle, we want to add another circle until our circle gets small enough to be the middle one, and then we stop. So at the end of our add circles method, after we add the circle we just made to our circles group, we're going to say this, because we're calling a method in the same class as we're in, dot add circles, which is the same method we're in, and pass in radius. But if we pass in the same radius, it'll just add circles of the same radius on top of each other. We don't want to do that. Let's call it with radius -2. So every time we call, the first time we call add circles, it'll run through, add a new circle, and then call itself, but with the radius that it got passed in -2. And then that'll go through and add that smaller circle, and at the end of that smaller circle, we'll get to this dot add circles, and it'll subtract 2 from that new circles, until at some point the radius gets less than 2, at which point we'll just return and then stop. So take a minute to look through this code and step through how it kind of calls itself, and we have inception of method calls, and see if you can understand it. So if we just leave it right now, we're not going to be able to see any difference in our circles because they'd all be black. So let's change the color of our circle. So up here, before we add it to our circles group, we're going to say circle.setFill, and we need to pass in some kind of color object to setFill. So we're going to use the color class, and the color class has a static method on it called HSB, which stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. So this way we can change the hue of each circle that we add. So let's make the hue a function of the radius. So circles with different radii will have different colors, different hues. So the hue, we're going to say radius, and we'll say radius times 50 to make the value of our hue change by a lot every time that we add a new circle. And then saturation can be the same every time. Let's say 0.8 saturation and 0.8 brightness. Cool. So let's give this a run and see what happens. So sure enough, we get a bullseye with a bunch of different circles, and the colors have changed in all of them. So the first time we go through, the radius times 50 happened to give us this green color, and then the second time the radius was -2, and that times 50 gave us this orange color, and then we kept stepping through and adding more layers to our add circles call until we got to a circle whose radius was less than 2, and then we stopped. And just so you know, I'm not making this up, the SetFill method, we can command or control click on this SetFill method to step inside the circle class, or in this case it's the shape class, which is like the parent of the circle, and see how it's implemented. So there's this method, public final void SetFill, that takes in a paint value that sets the color of that shape to whatever color gets passed in. So now if we go back to our main class, and if, say, I change the argument that I'm passing into our bullseye constructor to be 20 instead of 10, what do you think is going to happen? Take a second to think through how our code works and what do you think is going to happen. So if we click run, we get a bullseye with twice as many circles in it. So we start at 20, and then on each layer into add circles, we subtract 2 from that radius and add another circle. So of course, if we increase our starting radius, we're going to have more circles added until we get down to something that's less than 2. And in the same way, we can say 5, and then we get a bullseye with only 2 circles in it. Awesome, so that's how we can write a bullseye class that just recursively adds circles to itself to fill it in.